Matt Schaff and Jared Smola of DraftSharks.com here to get you ready for your Week 11 waiver wire runs. We've got a couple of quarterbacks to discuss, a rookie wide receiver, and a potential tight end savior if you're missing Trey McBride or Cade Otton for Week 11. Big absences for this upcoming bye week. But first, Jared, we've got a trio of running backs to sort out, and I want to know, who is your favorite Week 11 waiver wire target among Audric Estime, Gus Edwards, and Trey Benson?
Trey Benson for me. I'm always thinking upside with this stuff. And to me, I think Benson pretty easily beats those other two guys in upside. It starts with the way this Cardinals offense is trending. I mean, that performance against the Jets this past week, one of the better offensive performances I've seen by any team this season. Just considering the quality of the defense, we think the Jets are a good defense. It definitely didn't look good on Sunday, but I think it was more to do with the Cardinals offense, who, even before that, they had nice games against the Dolphins and Bears. So, 3 straight strong games out. They're averaging 29.3 points per game over their last 3. So the offense is trending up. I do think Benson's role is trending up a bit too. I mean, he's still the number 2 running back here behind James Conner, but if you look at the first half of this past week, 4 carries for Trey Benson to 9 for James Conner. That split in the first half the previous week was 11-3 in favor of James Conner. So we're talking like literally 2 carries here, but maybe we're seeing some trend with Benson getting more involved. I think he's reached the point where you could use him as an RB3 or flex play if you're dealing with bye week issues. But the big upside here is obviously the handcuff upside, just the way Benson's playing. At this point, I feel comfortable where, if James Conner did go down, I think you see Benson getting at least like 2/3 of this backfield work. And that would make him, I think a pretty easy top 20 fantasy running back.
Yeah, Amari DiMercato probably takes more receiving from Trey Benson than Benson and DiMercato do from James Conner. But I agree that Trey Benson would most likely be the backfield leader there. He's got the talent. That's why they drafted him where they did. The handcuff upside we've been talking about. We've mentioned him multiple times as a stash. Like, he should be on most rosters at this point where it makes sense. It doesn't make sense in every league, but where it makes sense to stash a guy like that, I think Trey Benson should be there. Like you said, the team is playing better. That's a part I didn't see coming. I thought that this Cardinals team was going to be okay at best the rest of the way and possibly worse than that, but they've been better. They've improved. They've looked good against 2 good defenses in a row. And there's a positive schedule going forward. I just highlighted the schedule in the fantasy playoffs for the Cardinals running backs, as well as Kyler Murray. They've got the Patriots and Carolina in that fantasy playoff stretch, weeks 15 through 17. Those could be terrific matchups for whoever's leading the backfield. And if James Conner does go down at some point, that could be Trey Benson making a real difference in some fantasy playoffs. So, like, if you have Conner, I would go ahead and cuff him. If you don't have Conner, I would go ahead and stash Trey Benson. I think how to sort Benson versus Gus Edwards and Audric Estime, of course, depends some on your format and what you need. If you need immediate help at running back, Trey Benson's probably not delivering you that, especially because his team is on bye this week. It also matters if you're in non-PPR, half PPR, full PPR, because I think Audric Estime, Gus Edwards are both much more interesting if you're in a non-PPR league. I think in that instance, Audric Estime is, I guess, no, I was about to say that Audric Estime, I think, is ahead of Gus Edwards, but I don't think so. I think I believe more in the Chargers team, and I guess Gus Edwards mildly as a player at this point, just because we've seen it. We know the coaches like him. And again, I trust the Chargers offense over Denver's. So if I'm in a non-PPR league, I'm taking Gus Edwards first. He came back from injury this past week, 10 carries to J.K. Dobbins' 15. Didn't get the goal line touchdown, of course. That went to Hassan Haskins because they just want to make sure that that backfield's frustrating. But, Gus Edwards is going to stay involved. The Chargers will continue to run the ball, even though they've been throwing more lately. And the offensive success overall just sets up scoring chances for the team. Audric Estime, I think the upside for him is that he's got the shot among these 3 guys to actually lead his team in carries going forward without anybody else getting hurt.
Yeah, definitely agree with favoring the Chargers offense, wanting pieces of this Chargers offense over Denver's. I think I would lean slightly towards Estime over Edwards. So I don't believe Gus Edwards is going to take over that Chargers backfield. I know J.K. Dobbins has not been efficient. Gus Edwards wasn't efficient either until this past week, and he did look good last week. As he played as well as he's played all season coming off the absence. But remember that Gus Edwards had averaged 3.0 yards per carry over the first 4 games of the season. With Estime, I mean, he has been Denver's best runner this season. It's a pretty small sample for Estime, but he is averaging 5.1 yards per carry, and that's compared to Javonte Williams at 3.8, Jaleel McLaughlin at 4.0. So my concern with Estime and why I definitely would not go overboard bidding for him this week on the waiver wire if you're in a league that uses Fab. One, it is Denver's offense and running game that just has been inefficient all season. I don't think that's going to change. Two, I'm not entirely convinced that like Estime just took over this backfield. Estime was the third running back into that game last week. Williams and Jaleel McLaughlin handled work before Estimated. So it could have been like a hot hand situation where Estime got going and Peyton just stuck with him. Peyton's been talking up Estime for a few weeks now, saying he's going to get more involved. So, maybe that was part of the plan to begin with. We just don't know at this point. But the fact that Estime might not be the backfield leader, then even if he is, like, what's the upside in this inefficient running game? I don't think Estime is going to do much in the passing game. So that's why, again, just thinking upside, like someone who's going to actually make a difference down the stretch in fantasy here. I just think Benson beats Estime and Edwards pretty easily in that potential to be a difference maker.
I agree. If you are looking for help sooner than what Trey Benson's likely to give you, though, you can stash Audric Estime, watch and see what happens against Atlanta this week, and then potentially have Denver's backfield leader for a week 12 matchup with the Raiders. That could be a really good spot. And then, we'll see from there whether he's usable beyond that point. But there are decent matchups with Cleveland the following week, another one with Indianapolis after Denver's week 14 bye. Not an exciting trio of running backs, just for what they can offer you immediately. But mention the upside with Trey Benson and, some mild help potentially from Estime and Edwards. Again, check out that fantasy playoff strategy article that's on draftsharks.com right now, because not only does it have notes about the Arizona backfield and quarterback, but across positions, looking at the upcoming schedules and maybe setting up your roster for that late season success before the rest of your league is thinking about it. Wide receiver, Jared, a little bit light in the waiver department this week, but Ricky Pearsall really did like what we hoped he would do. We expected him to be the third wide receiver for San Francisco. He was that, but clearly 3 ahead of 4 and scored.
Yeah, it looks good. The offense continues to look good. Obviously, Brock Purdy having, as strong the season as he's had as a pro so far. So that's all good. Like you said, Matt, he was the clear number 3 in terms of playing time, 71% of the pass routes for Ricky Pearsall in that game last week against Tampa. Juwan Jennings was up at 95%, Deebo Samuel 83%. So again, a pretty clear 1-2. I mean, Jennings is the guy I'd be super excited about, and I know he's not available in that many leagues, but I think he could be a real difference maker down the stretch. He was the one that stepped into the Ayuk role as that X receiver. I know there had been, I had thought maybe that might be Pearsall because there had been some reports that he'd been, working in that spot in practice, but it was Jennings who did that. I was also digging into the first read target share data that Fantasy Points has. I thought it was interesting what we saw last week in terms of first read targets. This is the guys that were designed to get the ball on these passing plays. Juwan Jennings led the way at 39%. Ricky Pearsall, though, was second on the team last week at 23%. Then you had Deebo Samuel at 19%, George Kittle at 12%. So almost like the opposite of what we would have expected. And of course, it's just 1 week, so we're still going to have to keep an eye on this passing game, how it's evolving. But I do think Pearsall, I think is going to play a big enough role the rest of the way to like at least be a wide receiver 4 flex play, especially helpful as we continue to work through these bye weeks.
Yeah, and of course, the message for anybody playing in the San Francisco offense is, yeah, it's loaded. So your weekly floor is not going to be especially high, but the Niners aren't just throwing guys out on the field for the sake of having them on the field. They will design plays for that rookie wide receiver. They will design plays for that guy who has been roster filler until this season, Juwan Jennings. So it's a good place to be on the field. That's what we said about Pearsall heading into last week. And, just for clarity, like Pearsall is the one in our waiver article. Juwan Jennings is not, but that's only because Juwan Jennings is rostered in more than 50% of leagues. So I'm not really considering him a waiver target. If he's available in your league, absolutely go ahead and grab Juwan Jennings and we'll see what he does going forward. I mentioned the weekly floor might be low, but the weekly ceiling is there for everybody in the offense because any of them can score at any given time.
For sure. We already saw it with Jennings earlier this season with that massive game against the Rams. So I'd be excited if you have Jennings on your roster going forward now.
Now, if you don't have Trey McBride because of the bye this week, or Cade Otton, who's been a recent stud, or you're just kind of hard up at tight end, Dawson Knox could be at least a 1 week rental savior for your lineup. Jared, he had just 3 targets and 2 catches against the Colts last week, but Dalton Kincaid suffered a knee injury in that game. We don't know yet whether Kincaid will miss further time. I think the fact that their bye is after this coming game probably helps the chances of them saying, all right, let's sit Kincaid for a week and then we'll see how he is on the other side of that. If that happens, good spot for Dawson Knox.
For sure. It's also Bills Chiefs this week, which is like a huge game. If Buffalo wants any chance of home field advantage in the playoffs, they have to win this game. So like we'll see on Kincaid. I'm sure if he's cleared to play, he's going to play. But if he doesn't, I mean, there's a lot working in Knox's favor as like a 1 week spot starter this week. For starters, I mean, we've already seen this guy be fantasy relevant. In the 2 seasons before Dalton Kincaid arrived in Buffalo, Knox finished tight end 11 and tight end 13 in PPR points. So we've seen him do it. Without Kincaid over the final 3 quarters of last week's game, Knox ran a route on 20 of 28 pass plays. So that's a strong percentage for a tight end. I think that like confirms that if Kincaid is out, Knox is going to get that, clear tight end 1 work in the passing game. And then this matchup against the Chiefs are 9th in our adjusted fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. They are 22nd against tight end. So this could be a game where the Bills do feature the tight end spot a bit more than usual. So I think Knox is going to settle in as like a low end tight end 1 in our week 11 rankings if Kincaid ends up being out.
Drake Maye continues to flirt with QB1 territory, just QB 15 this past week, but that's 4 top 15 finishes among his 5 games. Jared, what should I think about Drake Maye right now? Is he worth a pickup?
I think so, yeah, especially if you're one of these teams that has your regular quarterback 1 on bye this week. I like Maye as a spot starter this week. It just feels like he's sitting on a big fantasy game. He hasn't really had a huge one yet, but I do think look at the passing. I mean, for the season, Maye is at just 6.4 yards per attempt, but he's now topped 7 yards per pass attempt in 3 of his 4 full games. Super impressive considering, what he's working with there, both on the O-line and in the pass catching core. And then the rushing we've talked about, 5 carries and 46 rushing yards per game. We got 4 carries and 24 yards last week. I think that's more what we should expect from Maye going forward, but that's still, we're talking 2.5 fantasy points right there just from rushing. I think that level of rushing will continue. And then I like this matchup for Maye this week too. He's home for the Rams. The Rams are 21st in pass defense DVOA. They're 19th in our adjusted fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks. The Rams are allowing 8.4 yards per pass attempt. That's 2nd worst in the NFL. And then you have the Patriots implied for 19.5 points this week. Not a good number, but they've been down at 17 and a half a lot of these weeks. So they are implied for more points than they had been. So I think Maye is one of my favorite spot start options this week if you need one of those.
Yeah, I can see him as a solid spot starter this week. We'll see what you think of him compared to the next quarterback we talk about. My hesitation with Maye is still the limitation of his situation. And the Patriots have reached 20 points just 3 times in 10 games all season. They've reached 200 passing yards only twice all season. It just adds a bit of flimsiness to his potential to produce. The Rams matchup certainly can be good. They also have a pass rush that could give him trouble. So not a lock, but certainly a positive spot. And then other pretty good spots against Miami and the Colts the next 2 weeks. If you look at our strength of schedule page, it looks like Miami is a negative matchup. And that has been the case at plenty of times. The Rams didn't score very many points through the air against Miami on Monday night, but it's been a lot more about the conditions of playing against the Dolphins, especially that stretch where Tua was out, than it has been about Miami being a good pass defense. So I think Drake Maye could be, a sensible option there. Week 14 bye for him. The matchups don't look good after the week 14 bye. They're at Arizona, at Buffalo, home for the Chargers. So I wouldn't plan to have him in the mix for the fantasy playoffs, but I could see Drake Maye being a fantasy factor over these next 3 weeks.
More of a short-term rental guy than someone you're picking up to lean on as your quarterback 1 the rest of the way.
Now, if both Drake Maye and Bo Nix are on waivers this week, I would lean toward Bo Nix. 44% rostered on Sleeper, so not as available as Maye at this point, but 33% rostered on Yahoo, so a lot more available there, 50.5% on ESPN. So it varies quite a bit depending on the platform you play on. Just okay fantasy outings for Bo Nix in 3 of his past 4 games surrounding that big game against Carolina. But he really had a good game against the Chiefs this past weekend in what should have been an upset, if not for the late blocked field goal. 73% completions in that game, 2 touchdown passes against a tough Chiefs defense. He earned his 2nd best PFF passing grade of the season in that game, a QB 12 finish with just -5 yards rushing. So we've talked about how the rushing has helped Bo Nix, but he did it with passing in this game primarily. That makes 4 top 12 finishes among his past 6 games and just 1 turnover worthy throw, according to PFF, among his past 7 games. So he's been very good with the ball. It's still a limited offense, still doesn't have great receivers, certainly not a lock for weekly production, but Bo Nix has been a fairly high floor producer given his situation over that span.
Yeah, Bo Nix is quarterback 6 in fantasy points per game over his last 6 games. I would lean towards Nix over Maye as well if you're looking for a spot start option this week. I do think Maye beats Nix in upside, but I think you just feel a lot better about the floor with Nix at this point. His offense is more functional. We've seen him do this now for a bit longer than we've seen it from Drake Maye. And I think Nix's matchup just as good, if not better, than Maye's this week. The Broncos are implied for 23 points. Again, Maye's Patriots were at 19.5. So I think that fact alone should probably push you towards Nix. The odds makers are expecting more from this Broncos offense. Nix is home for the Falcons. They are 21st in adjusted points allowed to quarterbacks, so a couple spots worse than Drake Maye's opponent, the Rams. Falcons are 26th in pass defense DVOA, also worse than the Rams. So I do think Nix is the better play this week. Mostly for floor. I think Nix is less likely to really hurt you than Maye might be.
And even if you're not necessarily looking for help this week, Bo Nix has the 7th best remaining QB schedule by our adjusted fantasy points allowed. And really, if you look at it, like sometimes those can be misleading because there are a couple of matchups really boosting it. There are no terrible spots remaining on his schedule. The worst by our numbers are week 13 against Cleveland, which has not been nearly as good as it was last year defensively. And then week 16 at the Chargers. I'm probably not going to play Bo Nix for that particular matchup, but he could be in the playoff mix for a home game against the Colts and a week 17 road game at the Bengals. We'll see at that point. I'm not saying right now I'll start Bo Nix in week 17, but if you're sitting on like a solid QB1, but you could use an insurance option for the rest of the way, Nix is out there, I think it's worth stashing him even if you don't need him for week 11.
For sure, yeah, and he gets the Raiders next week. So, that I think if you are struggling at quarterback with these next 2 matchups for Nix, I think you're going to see him inside the top 15 in our rankings at least, if not inside the top 12.
Our team defense rankings, Jared, for week 11, plenty of people are going to be looking for streamers, especially if you used Arizona recently. I'm eyeing Houston, and I looked them up ahead of this show just because I was like, maybe they're not available enough to count. 28% rostered on Sleeper as of this morning. I'm guessing lots of people dropped them ahead of that Detroit matchup. That ended up being a pretty good spot where they picked off Jared Goff 5 times. Houston, of course, a good defense in general, 2nd in total defensive DVOA for the season. More importantly, though, this week, they get Cooper Rush and the Cowboys. And then after that, Tennessee and Jacksonville. So I'm picking up Houston, not just to play against Dallas this week, but to play for the next 3.
For sure. Good defense, 3 straight good matchups. Like this is one where I'd go 10% of your fab budget at this point of the season just to get Houston for at least these next 3 weeks. I do think they are, probably the best streamer option this week. The Cowboys are implied for 17.25 points. That's 3rd lowest on the week. Cooper Rush averaged just shy of 2.0 yards per pass attempt last week. Just an absolutely abysmal performance. So Houston, super safe play, good upside. I think the Packers are kind of right there as the 2nd best spot start option this week against the Bears, who did just fire Shane Waldron. That's definitely not going to hurt their chances going forward, but I think, there's a lot of other problems they have to solve. It wasn't just Shane Waldron, starting with Caleb Williams, his tendency to hold on to the ball. The Bears have now allowed 37 sacks this season. That's 2nd most in the NFL. They just gave up 9 sacks to the Patriots, who had 16 sacks over their first 9 games of the season. So excellent spot for the Packers, who are already a top 10 fantasy defense in most scoring systems right now.
And probably more available than they would otherwise be because they're coming off a bye. Week 12, assuming you don't have Houston to play, who do you like for that week?
Yeah, so the Dolphins get Drake Maye next week in week 12. The Dolphins, by the way, have the Raiders this week. So they're another defense you could grab now and play them this week against the Raiders, next week against New England. There is definitely downside to facing Drake Maye at this point, but he still is sitting on an 8.5% sack rate. That's well above league average. A 3.3% interception rate, well above league average. And the Dolphins defense is coming off that strong outing last night against the Rams. So I do feel better about them now than I did 24 hours ago.
And plus you get this week to see how Drake Maye and the Dolphins defense fare. And then maybe by next week, you're like, I actually need a different option besides Miami. But that's why we do this stuff ahead of time. You can find more streaming defense options in Shane Hallam's weekly streaming article on draftsharks.com. Right now, you can find more offensive player candidates for waivers, as well as specific bid recommendations in our weekly waiver pickups article. That's also on the site right now. And you can even find IDP targets if you play that way, with some strong week 11 matchups ahead in my weekly IDP waiver pickup article. Of course, you'll ultimately want to use your free agent finder as well to see exactly who the best available options are in your specific league, using your specific settings and judging by your roster. All of that comes together to make Draft Sharks your unfair advantage.